Before the birth of men, the dragons ruled all of Mundus. Their word was the voice, and they spoke only for true needs. For the voice could blot out the sky and flood the land. Men were born and spread over the face of Mundus. The dragons presided over the crawling masses. Men were weak then, and had no voice. The fledgling spirits of men were strong in old times, unafraid to war with dragons and their voices. But the dragons only shouted them down and broke their hearts. Kine called on Parthenax, who pitied man. Together they taught men to use the voice. Then dragon war raged, dragon against tongue. Man prevailed, shouting Alduin out of the world, proving for all that their voice too was strong. Although their sacrifices were many-fold, with roaring tongues, the Sky Children conquered, founding the first empire with sword and voice. Whilst the dragons withdrew from this world, the tongues at Red Mountain went away humbled. Jurgen Windcaller began his 7-year meditation to understand how strong voices could fail. Jurgen Windcaller chose silence and returned. The 17 disputants could not shout him down. Jurgen the Calm built his home on the throat of the world. For years all silent, the Greybeards spoke one name, Tiber Septim. Stripling then was summoned to Hrothgar. They blessed and named him Dovahkiin. The voice is worship. Follow the inner path. Speak only in true need. Etched into the faces of 10 ancient tablets, the story of the voice is available to all pilgrims brave enough to endure the 7,000 steps. The Thu'um, or the storm voice, the language of the dragons, is little more than folklore in modern times. Before the return of Alduin the World-Eater in the 201st year of the 4th era, the proud Nords of Skyrim had all but forgotten about their once sacred magical gift. Just as the Yakudan gods bestowed the power of the Shihai upon the Western warrior kin, the Atmorans received their signature magical power from their gods, specifically Kine, the goddess of the storm and of the elements. In the Merethic era and the First era, those Nords with the voice were called tongues, and they were living legends, capable of producing great gusts merely through exhalation. It was once the case that siege weapons were a frivolous waste of resources and manpower to the Nords, for with one tongue, the most fortified city gates in the land would yield to their shouts, torn from their hinges. As demonstrated through alchemy and spirit swords, a pervading theme is reinforced through the voice. Magic is not some isolated force, only relevant to those who wish to study it. No, magic is entirely ingrained in all things, from living things to inanimate objects. Nordic faith in their gods granted them a unique magic, one with immense potential. In fact, the voice was so powerful that those who could channel it eventually secluded themselves from the general populace, knowing that, were they to become corrupted, they could take over Tamriel effortlessly. But with great power comes great responsibility, and much destruction was avoided thanks to their restraint. Hey guys, it's Drew here and welcome back to FudgeMuppet. In this video we're going to discuss in depth one of the few remaining manifestations of magic on Tamriel, at least one of the few we know of. We'll go over its origins and history, as well as how it has changed over the centuries, and we'll even debunk a few commonly held misconceptions about the magic, like the misconception that only Nords and the Dragonborn could channel it. Behold the Thu'um, the storm voice. The word Thu'um means shout in the dragon language, and long before humans had the ability to control it, the dragons used the magic simply by raising their voices. As such, a heated argument among dragons was actually a form of fighting. Debating was a form of physical violence. So keep that in mind next time you say sticks and stones may break your bones but words will never hurt you. To the dragons, harassment was no different to physical assault. Battles between these creatures were ferocious verbal dialogues. When the dragons ruled the north, you had every right to be triggered by words. For many years, the dragons were the tyrannical rulers of men, using their innate magical abilities to subjugate the lesser creatures and force them into subservience. Eventually, the mortals rebelled, though their chances of victory were slim against such superior adversaries. The tides of war turned when Parthenax, the brother and once loyal lieutenant to Alduin, defected to the side of man. The Nords claim to this day that the change of heart was inspired by the goddess Kine, but either way, Paarthurnax taught the men to channel the dragon language, specifically the dragon shouts. This weapon gave the Nords the power to defeat the dragons. Now, while the dragons are the children of Akatosh, the Nords credit Kine for giving them the voice. After all, Kine controls the wind, the sky, and the storms, and early Nordic legends hold that she birthed their race. According to these legends, Kine exhaled upon the land, sending her breath down the slopes of the throat of the world. Her exhalation reached every corner of Skyrim, and thus the Nords were created. This is why you will hear Nords call themselves the sons and daughters of Kine to this day. With Kine's own breath at their disposal, the new masters of the voice shouted Dragonrend at Alduin, rendering him temporarily vulnerable, before banishing him with an Elder Scroll. Once the leader of the dragons was gone, and the greatest skill of the dragons now in the hands or throats of the Nords, the war was quickly ended, and the remaining dragons were hunted to extinction, with the exception of Paarthurnax, of course. The Storm Voice was gifted to the Nords at a time of great strife. Prudence gave way to urgency and necessity. Now humans had control of a mighty form of magic that was not originally intended for them. The voice was inherent to the dragons, yet they used it to create a cruel and sadistic totalitarian rule. Would the dragon tongue inevitably corrupt the Nords too? During the reign of the dragons, some men were given the power to act in the stead of their rulers. These men were known as dragon priests. They were glorified servants, yet in serving the dragon god kings, they were granted many liberties that other men were not. They were promised eternal life, and were allowed to create laws for the society of men. One of these priests, Merak, became the first dragonborn, blessed with the blood and soul of a dragon by the god Akatosh. In order to bolster his strength and realise his lofty ambitions, Merak sought out Hermaeus Mora, the Daedric prince of forbidden knowledge, and soon learned to bend the wills of men and dragons alike. This was long before the Dragon War. As a Dragonborn, he did not need Paarthurnax's teachings to harness the voice, for he developed it naturally, as all dragons do. Merak's deeds show just how powerful the voice can be when used without great caution. He used the Ben-Will shout to create a loyal army, and they built a grand temple in his honour. When Paarthurnax taught the Nords to speak the dragon tongue, 3 Nord heroes stepped forward to lead the forces of men against the dragons. These heroes were Hakon One-Eye, Gormlaith Goldenhilt, and Feldir the Old. Since the Dragon War of the Merethic era, the voice became a fundamental part of Nordic culture and conquest, and many new tongues followed in the footsteps of these original heroes. Unsurprisingly, breathing, singing, and speaking became fundamental facets of their racial identity. They believed themselves to be the children of the sky. On that note, the book of the same name, titled Children of the Sky, shows just how significant the voice was on Nordic customs and culture going forward. The book reads, "The breath and the voice are the vital essence of a Nord. When they defeat great enemies, they take their tongues as trophies. These are woven into ropes and can hold speech like an enchantment. The power of a Nord can be articulated into a shout, like the ki of an Akaviri swordsman. The strongest of their warriors are called tongues. When the Nords attack a city, they take no siege engines or cavalry. The tongues form in a wedge in front of the gatehouse and draw in breath. When the leader lets it out in a ki, the doors are blown open and the axemen rush into the city. Shouts can be used to sharpen blades or to strike enemies. A common effect is the shout that knocks an enemy back, or the power of command. A strong Nord can instill bravery in men with his battle cry, or stop a charging warrior with a roar. The greatest of the Nords can call to specific people over hundreds of miles, and can move by casting a shout, appearing where it lands. The most powerful Nords cannot speak without causing destruction. They must go gagged, and communicate through a sign language and through scribing runes. The further north you go into Skyrim, the more powerful and elemental the people become, and the less they require dwellings and shelters. Wind is fundamental to Skyrim and the Nords. Those that live in the far wastes always carry a wind with them. There are a few important things to take away from that source. The first subtle point highlights one of the misconceptions I mentioned at the top of the video. Apparently, the eastern races of Akavir had their own kind of magic very similar to the voice, which was channeled through shouts. This was called Ki. Scarce little is known of this magic, but it is not the only time a foreigner has used powers similar to the Nords and the Dragonborn. Mankar Cameron, the leader of the Mythic Dawn cult, discovered a similar power himself. In his commentaries, he notes the following: "Offering myself to that daybreak allowed the girdle of grace to contain me. When my voice returned, it spoke with another tongue. After 3 nights I could speak fire." Now, Mankar Cameron is no ordinary mage. During his dealings with Mehrunes Dagon, Mankar achieved a great deal more than most mortals could. He created his own plane of Oblivion, and used a Daedric artifact to alter his biology. But there is no evidence that he was dragon-born, and his achievements were self-made. The big takeaway from Children of the Sky is just how much the magic of the Nords has impacted their military strategies. Just like the Yakudan Swordsingers, their devotion granted them an arcane ability, a divine reward for their faith. And just like the Yakudan Swordsingers, it revolutionized the way Nords engage in warfare. While dominant armies of the era engaged in grueling sieges, susceptible to sickness and starvation as they endeavoured to break through the defences of fortified cities, the Nords needed only a few tongues to break any deadlock. It's no shock that centuries of hardship, combined with an insanely powerful new magic, resulted in a rapid rise to prominence for the Nords. Within 50 years of the commencement of the Skyrim conquests, the Nords owned almost all of northern Tamriel, including significant chunks of modern-day High Rock and Morrowind. The only thing saving Cyrodiil from being annexed by the forces of Skyrim was the inconvenience posed by the treacherous Jarol Mountains. According to the Nords, it was too great an ordeal for too poor a prize. This first empire of the Nords ran rampant in Tamriel, but as with all empires, its influence eventually waned. During this time, many legendary tongues came and went, including Derek the Tall, Jorg Helmbolg, and Hogue Merkiller. After the latter hero's death, Wulfarth of Atmora became the High King, and created a mighty legacy as one of Skyrim's greatest tongues. Wulfarth was dragonborn, and his powers were so potent that he could not verbally swear into office himself. It's a daunting prospect to question where the Nords would be had they not suffered 2 defeats at Red Mountain. After the first defeat, Jurgen Windcaller, a Nord warrior, and arguably the most powerful tongue of all time, wondered how the Nords could have lost, despite having the Storm voice at their disposal. In order to answer the question, how could strong voices fail, Jurgen began a 7-year meditative hermitage. He soon acquired the name Jurgen the Calm, and after years of introspection and contemplation, he realised that, just as the gods had given them the voice, they had also taken it away. Tyranny had weakened the dragons, and the gods instead had favoured the oppressed Nords. But with their conquests, the Nords had become no better than their former captors. Now they were experiencing their own version of that same punishment. Their arrogant and blasphemous usage of the voice needed to be stopped, and so he created the Way of the Voice. With this philosophy, the tongues aimed to use the voice solely for the glory and worship of the gods, not for the advancement of mortal ambitions. The Thu'um was bestowed upon the Nords so that they could seek enlightenment, not so that they could conquer the world. Jurgen displayed the power of his discovery by swallowing the shouts of his critics, and the tongues who followed him became the monks we now know as the Greybeards. When the Dragonborn returned in the 201st year of the Fourth Era, it was no coincidence. The last Dragonborn was a response by the gods to Alduin the World-Eater's tyranny. The magic of the Thu'um was emboldened by the need to overcome evil. The reclusive Greybeards have been criticised for keeping their powers isolated from the world, but that is because they understand just how powerful their magic is. It's not a tool to be used in war or political change. It is the might of Kine, reserved for those who seek enlightenment. It's hard to overlook the similarities between the Yakudan Shihai and the Nordic voice. Frandar Hunding, the greatest swordsinger ever to live, used his spirit sword to attain enlightenment, just as Jurgen Windcaller and the Greybeards did. So while the voice certainly holds the power necessary for an ambitious High King to conquer Tamriel, the gods would never allow it, and thus the balance of power in the Mundus is maintained. And there you have it guys, the Thu'um, the Storm voice. I hope you enjoyed the video, thanks so much for watching, I've been Drew, and I'll see you in the next one.